as we're going through this. So yeah, today we're going to make some obstacles. So we added some rewards on Tuesday. Oh, are we on week 4 or week 5? We are sort of in week 4. We're in week 4. We kind of started week 4 early, although I don't know what actual week it is in the semester. But on the schedule on the website, we're on week 4. We're doing this obstacles in collisions bit. So yeah, I'm going to make the artwork first, and I'm going to do something slightly different here. Instead of making an animated obstacle like we did with our reward, I'm just going to make a static image, but I'm going to make a few different versions of it so we can put different obstacles around in the scene. So that's one way to do it. You don't have to do it that way. If you want an animated obstacle, that's something that makes sense. We'll also make a moving obstacle maybe next week or sometime soon. But I'm just going to make a sprite sheet with a few different options for the obstacle. So I'm going to start with the artwork. I'm going to open up Pascal. And I'll leave it on the default 32 by 32. And I'm just going to save my obstacle. So I'm going to start the file name with obstacle _ and then for my obstacle, maybe I'll make like a cactus. So I'll say this is a cactus and click Save As. And when I'm designing the art and I'll put this in the items folder. So when I'm designing the art for something that I want to be an obstacle, I want to make it clear to the player that if they run into it, it's going to, block them or hurt them. So if I make an obstacle that's like, looks like something that you could collect, like our apple or like a coin or something like that, and then the player runs into it and it hurts them, that is going to kind of go against the convention that we're expecting. And so that's something that you might want to do if you want to kind of like, screw with the player or something like that. But generally, we want to stick with the convention. So if we make something that looks sharp and, scary, like a spider or a snake or a cactus or something like that, that should communicate to the player like, you want to avoid this. So for my cactus, I'm going to draw like a little rectangle in the middle just to give myself like a little guideline to draw around. And let's center that. I'm zoomed in a little bit. And then I'll go to a new frame. And so I guess I'm going to have another green thing. I have a lot of green things in this game. Maybe I can just make the cactus a different color. I'll make it like purple. And I can always change the color later. So I'll have a purple cactus. So I'm going to take my pen tool and just make an outline for the cactus. And maybe I want the base to kind of go out a little bit like that. And then I'll take the bucket tool and fill that in. And let's see, I'm going to center this. That looks okay. I think the color is too light. I'm going to make it darker. And maybe I'll make it a little bit more red. Okay, that looks a little bit better. So then let's put some spikes on it. I'll get like a gray color, like a dark color for the spikes. And then I might even put like some highlights on it, like some blood or something. So I'll make a couple spikes. So we want to make sure it looks scary and menacing. not like friendly. I don't know if it really looks like a cactus, but close enough. So I'll put some spikes on it. And then just to really emphasize that this is dangerous and scary, I'm going to put some like blood around it. So I'll get like a light red and maybe put some blood on some of the spikes and maybe some specks of blood down here. So it'll look like, somebody ran into it. So that's my first cactus. It's actually more detailed than I usually do for the obstacle. So that looks pretty good. So let's make another one. I'm just going to delete my original outline, but I'm going to make another outline. And so I'll use the main cactus as kind of like the basis, but then I'll kind of switch things around a little bit. So I'll make a slightly different one. And I could do different colors and stuff like that as well. But for now, I'm just going to kind of keep it simple. Okay, so here I have another cactus. I'm going to fill that in. And then draw some spikes. Usually I do 3 frames, but this is taking a while. I'm putting more detail into this than I usually do. So I'm just going to do 2, but you could do as many of these frames as you want. And so you see when we bring this over to the game, I can make copies of this and select different frames. And so that makes it easy to have like a lot of different scenery or obstacles in this case, but choose different frames. So that gives us more options without having to create a lot of separate images. So those are my spikes. Let's put some blood on here. I'm going to get the red color again and just put some little blood streaks around here. Okay. That looks pretty good. So that's scary enough. It's not the scariest obstacle I've ever drawn, but it should be menacing enough that the player will know they don't want to be near it. Okay, so let's save this, and now we're going to export it. So as I mentioned, I just made 2 frames just for this example, but you could really make as many frames as you want, and we'll use these as separate obstacles around the scene. So I'm going to go ahead and export this. I'm going to leave the scale at 1 and click download. And I'll go to my desktop, go to my project folder, go to my game folder, and go into the sprites folder and save my cactus obstacle. So if I go to my project folder, into my game, into sprites, there's my cactus. So that's what we're going to add into the game now. Yes, this is being recorded. I think so. Did I start? Yeah, I started recording. All right. So we did the art. And you could also make more than just one image on the sprite sheet. Like I did 2 cactuses that are pretty similar, but you could make as many different obstacles as you want with different types of graphics, different colors. I'm just putting them on one sprite sheet just to make it simpler to add into the game. So you'll see how that works in a second. So I've got my art. Let's go to Godot. I'm going to open the Godot app and choose my game and click edit. And so now it's loaded up. And just like we did on Tuesday, we're going to start by creating a new component. So now we have a player component and an apple component. And so we're going to start today with an obstacle component. Since it's a cactus, I'll call it a cactus. But we're pretty much going to do something pretty similar to what we did on Tuesday. So this one, I'm going to create a new scene. So I'm going to go up to this empty scene that's up here and click on the other node to start a new scene. And for this one, with an area 2D, last time we used an area 2D, and if you use an area 2D, it'll detect when the player is coming in, but it won't stop the player from moving through. So it's not going to block the player. It's just going to know if the player is overlapping with the area. So you could use that here, and the player could just walk on the cactus and get hit. But we might want to stop the player from hitting the cactus. And so it could be an obstacle just in terms of the player runs into it. But it could also be an obstacle in terms of like the it hurts the player. So either one of those is possible. So instead of an area 2D, what I'm going to use instead is a static body. So this is under our physics. Let's look at the other things that are in here. So we have our collision object, physics body. So the kinematic body is what we use for the player. That's for something that's moving. A rigid body 2D is for something that has physics but isn't being controlled by the user. So like particles or projectiles, things like that. And then the static body is similar to the area 2D, but it just has collisions in physics, so it can prevent our player from moving through it. But like it sounds like static, it's not supposed to move. So it's not going to move if we like apply forces to it or do other things like that. So I'm going to click create. And so let's rename this. This is going to be our cactus scene. And so we want this to be in the middle because we're going to be importing it into other scenes. Whoops. Oh yeah, I do want to save this. So now that we've started it, let's save it. So I'm going to hit Control S to save and go into scenes. And this is a component. So I'm going to go into components and save this as cactus in there. So we need a collision shape as usual for our physics object. So I'm going to add a child node and type in collision shape. And then this collision shape needs a shape. So let's go over to the shape and add, I guess the capsule is probably like the closest size to our cactus, but we could actually add multiple shapes if we want to. I think I'll stick with this and see how it looks. And then we want to add in our art. So I'm going to click the plus again. And so I'm not going to use an animated sprite for this, so I'm just going to use a regular sprite. And for my regular sprite, I just need a texture. So I'm going to click on the texture empty and go to load and go into sprites and find my cactus. And since this is a sprite sheet, you can see that we have two cactuses, which is not what we want. So to change that, we're going to go to the animation section. And we have two vertical frames. So I'm just going to change V frames to 2. And so now if I want my second cactus, I can just change the frame number. And I can do this either with code or with the editor. So I'm going to leave this on frame 0 for now. And now I want to make sure that the collision shape is not bigger than the art. So I'm going to move the collision shape. And let's move the collision shape down in the hierarchy so we'll see it on top of the cactus. And so I really don't want it to be bigger than the art because, again, if it's bigger than the art, what's going to happen is our player is going to come along. And if the cactus is too big, if it comes out to here, our player is going to get hit by the cactus before it actually arrives in this in the art. So we want to make sure the collision shape is probably smaller than the art, and then how much smaller you can kind of play with to get the right approach. So this one's a little tricky actually because it has like these extra areas. So we could actually add a couple extra collisions if we want to. I haven't really done that with this lesson before, but we could give it a try in a second. So let's just start with this collision shape here and see how that works. And so now we can actually add this into our scene, and we still have a couple things that we have to add, but we can go ahead and add this into our scene and see if it works. So I'm going to open up a scene. I'm going to keep using the background scene since I added my rewards in here. So I have the apples. I'm going to add some obstacles in here. So I'm going to right click on the background scene and click add child node and call this obstacles. Oh, wait, sorry, I want to jumped ahead a little bit. I want to get a node 2D first and then call this node 2D obstacles. And I'm going to move this up so it's just above the player. And then again, I'm going to add instances of my obstacle in here. So I'm going to click on the link button to add an instance and then look for my cactus. And so there's my cactus. And there it is in the scene. Looks pretty decent. Probably want it to be like on the ground, or at least touching the ground. So let's make our grid snap a little bit smaller so I have more options for where to snap it to. Okay, that's pretty good. So let's put one there. And so now I have a couple of options. So if I want to make another cactus, I can duplicate this. Here's cactus 2. And if I click on here, I can't change the art because I don't have access to that value that changes the art. So what we can do instead is add a script that will let us change the art through the code. So I'm going to put cactus 2 over here, and we'll see how that works in a second. So we have to go back to the original cactus scene, and if I go to the sprite here and change the frame and save that, now look, the frame for both of these is updated because it's one copy of this cactus instance. But what I really want is for there to be 2 different images here. So I'm going to go back and set this frame to 0. And later when we write our script, we're going to add a way to change the frame for each instance. Okay, so let's see if this works. I'm just going to run my scene. And I should run into the cactus. See, when I hit the cactus, I can't keep going. But I should be able to jump over it. So, it's not that difficult to get past the obstacle, but it gives me something to work with in terms of adding difficulty to the level. And then we'll also add a function that will let the cactus hurt the player if we run into it. So we'll leave it there for now. Okay, so let's go back to our cactus scene. And so now we're going to add in a script so that we can change the frame and also do something when the player hits the cactus. So I'm going to click on the cactus and create a new script. And there's a copy of the script, as usual, in the assets folder. So if you look in 270 assets, go to scripts, this is called the simple obstacle or obstacle simple. And you can see there's not actually a whole lot going on here. So it's a little bit different. I actually used an area 2D in this previous example, but we're using a static 2D. But it's basically the same thing other than that. So anyway, we're going to create our own script here. So I'm going to click on the cactus again and go down to the script field in the inspector and click empty. And we're going to do a new script. So I'm going to do an empty template. And then for the path, I always have to change this. It's always trying to put the script inside the same folder as the object, which is not what I want. I want to click on the folder and go back a couple times and go to the scripts folder. And I actually don't want to call this cactus because I might have other static obstacles. So I'm just going to call this obstacle simple. And then click create. Okay, so we can see our static body 2D matches our main node over here. And so the first thing we want to do is change the frame number. So we're going to make an export variable. Remember, export is a keyword that makes the value visible to the editor. So then I just type var to make a variable, and I'm going to call this frame number. And so now we're going to use what's called the ready function. This is a function that is going to execute when the game starts just once. And what we'll do is we'll get a reference to our sprite. So I can use the $sign to get a reference to nodes that are attached to this script. So I'll just say sprite and then dot frame. And so what I'm doing there, our sprite has this frame property, and I'm just going to set that to a number. So I'm going to say sprite.frame equals frame number. And so that way we can set different frame numbers for different obstacles in our scene. And so let's give this a default value. Let's set it to 0. And so now if we go to our cactus node, it's giving me an error, but let's see. Go to our cactus node. Okay, there we go. So there's our script variables and there's our frame number. So we can set that for different cactuses. So if I go to my background scene, here's the first cactus. We'll leave the frame number at 0. Here's my second cactus, and I'll change the frame number to 1. So the thing that's a little tricky here is that it doesn't update in the editor, but it will update when I play the game. Okay, so now I have 2 cactuses with different art. So that's basically what I want in terms of the cactus experience. The only tricky part here is just remembering how many frames there are and then knowing that it's going to look different than in the editor. And then there also is one collision shape that applies to both cactuses. But as long as they're close enough to looking the same, the collision shape should work pretty decently. And if it doesn't look right, we can go in here and test. So we can change the frame number inside the editor. And we can say, okay, this doesn't quite line up, so maybe we want to move it here. And then it's a little bit off here. So, we have a little bit of an issue there, but I don't think it's too big of a deal. I think it works well enough. So you could just make lots of different obstacle scenes, but this will kind of save you a little bit of time making tons of scenes if you have relatively similar artwork. Okay, so now let's make our cactus hurt our player. So right now, it just prevents our player from walking along. But in my game, my player can jump pretty high. So there's nothing that's really going to make it hard for me to get past this cactus. So we can make the cactus a little bit more punitive by hurting the player when the player hits the cactus. And so this is another cool thing with Godot is when we do an event, we'll actually get a reference to the player, so we can call code that's part of the player when that event happens. So for our cactus, let's add a signal like we did with our reward. So we'll go over to the node tree and we'll get a collision event. We got to go here. Maybe a static body doesn't have. I don't see a. Let's see. What did we use for the? What did we use for our apple? So the area has an area entered. Okay, so I guess the static body doesn't have this type of collision. We can either, so we have a couple options here. We could either add a separate collision to our obstacle, or we could add in an area around the obstacle. So let's do that. Let's add in a new area, and we'll just have to make it sure that it is smaller, or actually larger than the main static body. So I'll just hit the plus. And this is actually a good thing to go over because we can add like multiple components to our physics setup. So I'll make an area 2D, and I'll call this hit area. So we'll have to adjust our code a little bit. And so let's take our hit area, and we need to give it a shape. So we'll add a child node, we'll add another collision shape, and we'll do another capsule. And yeah, we'll just make it a little bit bigger. So if we run into this area, we'll get hurt, but it wouldn't prevent us from moving through it. So we actually need 2 colliders to achieve this example. So then I'll take my hit area and add an event here. So here we go. So we just want body entered. So I'm going to double click and connect that to my cactus script. And this receiver method looks fine. It's going to be different from the example code, but it's good enough. So I'll just click connect. And so here we're going to get a reference to the body. So again, I'm going to print the body. So I'm just going to type print and then put in this body that we're getting from this event. And so let's take a look at what that looks like. Oh, I'm playing the wrong scene. Got to go back to the background scene. Play that. Okay, so now when I hit the cactus, notice there's a couple things happening. You see the player, but then at the very beginning, the cactus is actually interacting with the tile map. So we don't want that to happen. We need to do our areas for our physics layers for that, but we'll fix that in a second. Okay, so now we know when the player is running into the cactus. And if we look at the player script, I'm going to open the player script for a second. There's a function that we can use for when the player gets hit that is already written. So we don't have to write this ourselves, but we have to take a look at it for a second. So there's a function here called enemy collision. And what it does is it plays our hit function and it temporarily suspends the player movement for as long as the animation plays. And this is alive, but I think it should be is moving. But anyway, we're just going to leave that as it is. But any function that's attached to an object, we can call if we have a reference to that object. So if I go back to my cactus script, so I'll just click on the cactus script here. All we have to do here is say body.enemy collision. And this is going to throw an error at first because my tile set doesn't have one of these on it. So we're going to get this nasty error and it's actually going to close our game. So we have to set up our physics layers to make sure that doesn't keep happening. So let's go back to our cactus scene. And I just have to put the cactus, I'm going to go over here and just make sure it's on the right layer. So the collision layer for the cactus is, we need a new layer. So let's go to project settings, and let's type in layers. And we're going to go to 2D physics layers. And so when we add a more complicated obstacle, we're actually going to have more layers. But for now, let's just do the obstacle body and the obstacle hit area. So there's actually 2 different layers that are associated with this one obstacle. So there's the body of the obstacle, which is the area that we run into, and then there's the hit area, which is going to hurt the player. So for the main static body of the cactus, I just have to go to layer and choose obstacle body. And then I'm going to turn off the player because it's obviously not part of the player. And then for the mask, this one's simple. We want to leave the player on because the player can run into it and it's not going to interact with anything else for now. So then for the hit area, I'm going to go to collision, change the hit area to obstacle hit area, and turn off player. And again, I can ignore the mask because we do want to hit the player and we don't want to hit anything else. So now we'll fix that error and we'll also see the player get hit, hopefully. So let's go to the background scene and hit play. Oops. Okay, we're still getting an issue here. So I probably have the tile map on the wrong layer. So let's take a look at that. So I'm going to click on the tile map and go to collision. Yes, the tile map I'd never set to be on the tile map layer. So let's put that on the platforms layer, turn off the player, and now we should be ready to go. Okay. Okay, sweet. So the player gets hit and, oh yeah, for some reason, the player doesn't survive getting hit. So I'm probably missing something there. We could probably just turn that off, but let's take a look at the code. But anyway, let's see and make sure the player can get hit over here. Yeah, so the player gets hit over there as well. And let's take a look at the code for a second to see why the player is not going back to normal. So I'm going to go to the player scene. Oh, I know why it is. It's actually something that we covered on Tuesday. So when the player gets hit, there needs to be a signal that says when the hit animation is done, this is down here, that's when we set is alive back to true. So that's when the player starts moving again. So we do need to connect the animated sprite animation finish signal to the player. This would be set up if you use the default player thing, but since we created this player from scratch, it's not set up correctly. Okay, so now we should be able to do the scene. Okay, so the player gets hit, and then eventually it stops getting hit and we can walk around. So nothing else happens. You can see that I can get hit as many times as I want and nothing else in the game changes. That's something that we'll add as we make the game a little bit more complex. We'll add some logic to see, like, you know, how many lives does the player have? So how many times can I run into stuff before, you know, the level restarts or the game ends or something else happens? All right, so I'm done setting up my obstacle, and I already added my reward. So I've done everything I need to do for this week. So let's do some documentation. And let's see, how are we doing on time? We're actually doing decently. So I'm going to do something slightly different with the documentation today, just in case you guys want to do this yourselves. I'm going to record a video. Just as a quick reminder, there are some links on the Open Lab. So I'm going to go to Open Lab first. There's some links on the Open Lab. If you go to links and go to documentation. Oh, that's weird. Huh. That's weird. Let me log in and see what the deal with that is. I'm going to log in real quick. Oh, there it is. Okay, I guess you have to be logged in to see this page. I wonder if that's always the case. Let me see if I click edit. Is this like a private page or something? Okay, status and visibility, public. Huh. Oh, I guess maybe it's not published, but I can see it. Okay, I'm not really sure what was going on there, but let's go back. I'll have to look at that later. Anyway, if you go to the links here and go to documentation, you're going to see some videos about how to do documentation both on Mac and Windows. So I'm on Windows, so all of my examples are going to be using Windows, but you can also do basically all the same stuff on a Mac. So there's some options here for that. I'm not sure why this video isn't loading. I'm going to have to see. Oh, there it is. Okay, it's just going slow. So anyway, since I've got a lot of stuff going on in my scene, instead of taking like a bunch of screenshots, I can take a video. So the way to do that is pretty similar to taking a screenshot. I'm going to run the scene first. And then just like I do when I'm doing a screenshot on Windows, I'm going to hit Windows G. And this is going to bring up the Xbox game bar. This does not work on the Mac. So on the Mac, you can just use the screenshot tool like you used to do a screenshot, but take a video instead. So if I want to do a video capture, instead of hitting the camera, I just hit the record button. I don't need sound for this. I'm not recording sound. So I'm just going to turn. Is there a way to just turn the sound off? Whatever, I'm not going to worry about that. Okay, so I'm just going to hit the record button. And so now I'm recording my game window. So if I walk around, now we can see those cool animations. And we can see the character jump and get hit by these cactuses. And that's pretty much all I want to demonstrate. So a quick video is good enough. So now there's this little game bar widget up here. And so I just have to hit stop. and then I'll close my game. And then depending on how you have stuff configured on your computer, this file should show up in this like videos folder, which I think is in the documents folder or not. Let's see. Where is it? Users, Owen, video. So it's just in my user folder. So it kind of depends on your Windows setup, but there should be a default location. And so here's the capture. And if I click on that, we should be able to watch it. Oh wait, no, whoops. This is my, that's my OBS video, which I'm doing right now. Hopefully that didn't break anything. Okay, let's go into this captures folder. Hopefully it's in here somewhere. There it is, okay. So it's an MP4 file. And so we see our game window. And so this is another good way to do some documentation because we actually see the animations, we see the movement. So there's more detail than what we can capture in just the screenshots. So as the game gets more complicated, making a video may make more sense in some cases. So now we can upload this to the Open Lab. And you might want to put this in your project folder. I actually have like a lot of images that I haven't added to my project folder. So let's do that real quick. So I'm just going to go in here and make a new folder, and I'll call this documentation, and I'll just dump all this stuff in here so I don't lose it. And I should probably name it stuff that's easier to understand, but anyway, it doesn't really matter as long as you know where it is. So here's my MP4 file. So let's put that on the Open Lab. So I'm going to go back to the browser and click plus to make a new post. So let's choose the categories first. So for this one, we added some rewards. We added obstacles. And we also added these collisions. So let's say rewards and obstacles. And I'm just going to start with the video that I created. So I'm going to click on the plus here. And so if I want to add a video, I need to use a video block. So I'm going to type in video, and that'll bring it up on WordPress. And I could drag and drop here, but I'm just going to click upload. So this is on my desktop. I put it in this documentation folder, and there's the MP4 file. Click open. So let's see, game documentation. And so I'll say I added an apple as a reward and a cactus as an obstacle. And then let's also put in the art as well. So I'm going to click and make a gallery here, and then click upload, and go to my game, go to the game folder, go to sprites, and here's my, where's my apple? Here it is. Here's the apple reward. And let's not crop the images. And let's see, how do I add to the gallery? The gallery is kind of tricky. Okay, there's a gallery, display multiple images. Oh, there's an add button. So let's upload and add the cactus. There we go. So here's the apple sprite sheets. And here's my cactus sprite sheets. And so let's preview this post. For some reason there's like a bunch of space around the game. I'm not really sure what the deal with that is, but we can still see it. So that's good enough. And oh, this looks weird. I don't know what the deal with these, why these images are getting sized up, but I'll have to investigate that later. Anyway, this looks good. So I'm going to go back and publish. And then that's it. So yeah, that's everything for the assignment that you need to turn in.